Diana, written and read by Hatter. Life can seem unfair at times, and things happen for reasons we can't explain. Such is the story I'm about to tell you of a young girl named Diana. Once, long, long ago, and far, far away, in a kingdom called Lesmore, there lived a young girl by the name of Diana. She was just 11 years old and lived with her parents in a small house. They were not wealthy nor poor, but they worked very hard to make ends meet. To earn a living, the mother washed and sewed and mended clothes, while the father cut trees for firewood and performed household repairs for those that needed a handyman to fix a leaky roof or a broken window. They earned enough, though, to provide for themselves and their daughter, whom they loved very much. The small house where they lived was in a forest near a stream that brought them fresh, cold water from the Black Mountains to the north. Because they lived so isolated, Diana had no friends with which to play. All she had was her cat named Jasmine, and Jasmine cared only about sleeping, not playing. So Diana spent her time reading and dreaming of a glorious life of adventure beyond the forest. She would often go for walks in the forest alone, play with imaginary friends, skip rocks on the water, or make little boats from twigs and leaves with bugs as passengers that the stream's current would carry away. Her mother and father wanted their daughter to be more responsible and disapproved of her behavior. That to them appeared to be both lazy and reckless. Although they loved her, they told her she was very much a dreamer, and that nothing comes of those who spend their life with their nose in a book, reading and dreaming all day long and make for a lazy girl. They told her she should be ashamed of herself for wasting the time that Allah gives her on fantasies of the mind. She was warned of the many dangers of the forest, such as wolves and bears, and to stay away from the stream, as the water was deep and freezing and the currents were swift. They warned her that unless she learned to be more responsible with her time, the Lord may one day take her time away. Diana's mother made her do chores before she would give her daughter time to read and play. Diana was very stubborn, though, and always looked for ways to sneak away to read and play just a little bit more. It was not that she was bad, she just loved to daydream. One day her father was off working in the forest. Diana was supposed to be sweeping the floors, but instead she was dancing around with a broom, imagining it was some dark, handsome prince. Her mother came into the room and upon seeing Diana pleaded frustratingly, "Diana, how will you ever finish sweeping if all you're going to do is fantasize and dance with that broom?" Diana stopped and looked down ashamed. She apologized and then peeked up at her mother. She asked sheepishly, "When I finish sweeping, may I read my book?" Her mother shook her head despairingly, and sighed. "Diana, I have to go to town and deliver a basket of laundry and pick up more. When you finish sweeping, I want you to mop the floors, wash the dishes, and dust. Then make your bed. Once you've finished, if I'm not home, you may read, but only until I return, and don't leave the house." Diana watched as her mother Diana watched as her mother leave from the window, and as soon as her mother was out of sight, she thought, "I think I'll read just a little bit first. Then I'll have time to get my work done." She grabbed her book and went outside to the forest to read. It was a bright sunny day with blue skies. The bees and butterflies floated on a warm breeze as dragonflies buzzed all about. The smell of flowers and pine trees beckoned her to walk along the forest path. She would stop occasionally and lean against a tree, or sit under one and read a bit, and then back up to walk and daydream more. The path took her deeper and deeper into the woods. As she read and daydreamed of adventures, only in passing did she give a thought to the dangers of the forest her father and mother had warned her about, things like wolves, evil jinns, or travelers that kidnap young foolish children. She thought, how could there be any dangers? The forest was so inviting, and the sunshine so warm. It made her feel safe and secure. Surely Allah would protect her from all harm. As Diana walked along the trail, in daydreaming, she paid no attention to how far or how long she had walked, nor had she noticed she had wandered from the path. Soon she came to a stream, the same one that passed by her house. Diana stopped and looked around. Where am I? She thought. Still, she knew that she could follow the stream and it would take her back to home. The stream passed through the darkest part of the forest, yet there was no concern to her, as it was still light. It didn't seem to matter to her that the sun was getting lower. It soon would set. Diana reasoned that she had time to read a little bit more. The story about princes, princesses, magic, and magic carpets was too good to put down. She climbed to the top of a boulder near the water's edge, being careful not to slip in and fall into the raging waters, as that would have been deadly. She sat down on the rock and continued to read. The breeze was soothing. The sun was warm, shining down. The sound of the water flowing past her had a calming effect. She shut her book and looked off into the distance. There she could see the peaks of the Black Mountains looming above the trees and extending into the clouds. She closed her eyes and imagined a magic castle high up in the mountain, filled with gems, gold, fine food, music, and adventures. It was not long before Diana fell asleep on the boulder at the water's edge. When she woke, it was dark and cold. She was shivering and scared. The forest was pitch black, and she didn't know which way was home. Now it was too dangerous to follow the stream. She could not see and might fall in and drown. She was very scared and felt as if she had been locked up in some dungeon with no way out. She began to cry and wish that she had stayed home to do her chores her mother had told her to do. After crying and praying to Allah for a bit, she paused. There was a sound coming from the forest, not too distant, but like someone was singing. At first she feared maybe it was an evil jinn that wanted to eat her alive. The voice was that of a man, and yet angelic, as though calling to her to come near. She thought perhaps, however, whomever it was might help her find her way home. She followed the sound in the dark forest, stumbling and falling as she made her way towards the voice that was singing mournfully at times, yet so beautifully. As she got closer, she could smell the smoke of the fire and hear the crackling as well. Soon she came into an opening in the woods and saw the flickering of the flames. As she moved closer, she could see a campfire and someone sitting next to it, poking the coals in the wood with a stick while singing in a language she didn't understand. Diana was as innocent as could be, but she was smart enough to know sometimes innocence is like a rabbit to the hawk. And now she felt afraid again. In this situation, though, she had little choice but to overcome her fears, so she stepped forward into the opening. She approached softly, not wanting to alarm the stranger, who seemed to take no notice. Finally, the man stopped singing, and he looked up. Diana could see in the light of the fire that he was dressed from head to toe in black attire. His face was wrinkled with age. A black mustache and goatee adorned his face beneath his hawkish nose. His eyes were deep set and appeared sad. Still, it reminded her of the dashing characters she read about in her book of Arabian Tales, and she wondered if perhaps he was a prince. Behind him stood a large black horse. It was both powerful and elegant in the flickering light of the fire. The horse's eyes glistened like two lamps, reflecting the fire's flame. It was unlike any horse she had ever seen before, as this horse had a pair of large wings, folded at his side, much like those of a falcon. He motioned with his fingers to come closer and said, "Child, do not fear. I mean you no harm." She was terrified, but the force scared her more, and as if she needed more motivation, she heard wolves crying in the distance behind her. So she quickly moved to his side for protection. His voice was soft and reassuring as he told her the wolves were far away and would not approach the fire. Then he asked her her name. She answered softly in a voice that sounded almost apologetic. He smiled and patted the ground beside him and asked her to sit down with him and warm herself by the fire. Diana was very cold, so she accepted without question. He asked, "What are you doing in the forest so late at night? Are you unaware of how dangerous it is to be here alone at this hour?" Without hesitation, Diana told him how and why she left home, how she had got lost, fell asleep next to the stream. He listened silently, poking the coals, not speaking a single word. Then, after a pause, she asked, "Is this my punishment for having disobeyed my parents?" Without looking up to reply, he answered, "Dear, it's not for me to judge. Only your parents and the Almighty Allah may judge your actions." After some moment he added, "Yet, for every deed, good or bad, there is a price to be paid, or reward to be given." Diana asked him to tell her about the song he was singing. The words were unknown to her. He said, "It is a sad song, a poem actually, of a boy lost in the desert with neither food nor water." She asked the stranger, "Was he found?" He raised his eyebrows and sighed deeply. "Ah, yes, eventually, subhanallah. But unfortunately, though, only after the young boy had died." She thought that is indeed a very sad song, and asked, "Why did he have to die?" The stranger answered with a shrug, "Why does the innocent newborn die in its crib? Why does the thief or evil person live to ripe old age? These are questions. Only the one true God knows the answers." He added, "And it is not for us to question why." Then he began to recite the poem in her language. "The desert burns the flesh by day and freezes the soul by night. With death comes blowing sands to strip tender flesh and blood away, leaving only pale white ivory bones, a reminder to warn to others. A desert is not for man nor boy to stray." The poem disturbed her deeply, and she wished to change the subject. So she interrupted him and asked him about the horse, telling him she thought winged horses were just fables, and had never seen one before. He smiled and answered as if a riddle. Many have seen, but few have told. For the dark-winged horse and its rider are rarely welcome. She must have looked frightened as he quickly added, I will offer you a ride and take you home to your parents when it comes light. This made Diana smile, and she asked, Where do you come from, and why are you here this late at night? He said, I come down from the Black Mountains as I do every night, and I sit here by my fire. Then, smiling at her, he added, I also come to look for lost souls and take them home. She was pleased now and felt comfortable with this stranger, a prince she fancied. They talked all night long and shared long stories. She was amazed and appreciated the stranger with all her heart, imagining he must be a guide for the lost, like her seeking a way back home. She wanted to ask him why he couldn't have helped the lost boy in his song, but decided that would be silly. It was just some poem. Soon the light of day was beginning to shine. It was still dark, but the glow of the sun made the sky appear in orangish red. The fire had now burned out, and the last embers were gone. Only ash remained. Diana looked up at the stranger. He was tall, standing there, preparing his flying horse to take her home. Suddenly she realized how rude she had been. She had forgotten to ask his name. Kind sir, she asked, may I know your name? He didn't reply immediately, but he gently lifted her up and placed her on his horse. Then he too mounted the stallion behind her. The horse reared up and bellowed out, raising up on its hind legs, its front legs pawing at the air. The huge wings unfolded and flapped as it lifted off the ground and into the sky. The stranger now leaned forward and whispered softly in her ear, My dear child, my dear child, my name is Malak Almat. That morning Diana's father left the house to search for his daughter. She had disappeared and not come home. Her mother sat at home crying and praying to Allah. Her father found Diana's book on a boulder deep in the woods, near the stream's edge. With a heavy heart, he followed the stream all the way back to very near their home. Then, as if a miracle, he saw her laying there, as if asleep on the shore of by the water's edge, just yards from their house. He ran to his daughter and lifted her lifeless corpse. It had been washed up from the stream. The cold black waters had carried her small lifeless body back and deposited it there on the shore where the stream ran past their house. He took Diana home and told his grieving wife their daughter was gone. She had fallen in the stream and drowned, and was taken by Malak Almat, the angel of death.